thank the Ministry of Culture for supporting us, the European program ARTos that also made that possible as well. The art historian, the media art historian, Anarchy and Anarchy from Greece, who prepared all the documents outside so to get an idea about Stella's work. Of course, I want to thank Dimitra Galitsi and Sani, who is the team here in ARTos, that make sure that everything works smoothly. And without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Stella, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. So as a performance artist, I've always been interested in the kind of evolutionary architecture of the human body, the biological apparatus that generates awareness and allows us to operate effectively in the world. And with my original suspension performances, I guess it was more about the exploration of the physical and psychological parameters of the body. These performances were about the body as a sculptural form, the stretched skin as indicative of the gravitational pull of the body located in space. Here the body is counterbalanced by a ring of rocks, each rock connected to one insertion point. The body was gently swaying from side to side, setting up random oscillations in the rocks. These performances were more about affect, were more about spectacles of sensation rather than modes to generate meaning. There's no meaning attached to these performances other than the body being a physical object in a gravitational field. The body in a spinning suspension. And over East 11th Street in New York, I had a good view of the police cars that arrived within the first 5 minutes. What was supposed to be a 30-minute performance was terminated after about 12 minutes. And when the police pulled me through the window, they demanded to see my ID, which was difficult to show in the circumstances. This suspension event was one in which the body was not statically suspended, but connected vertically to a gantry crane. The control box allowed me to choreograph my body through the space. So the body, it wasn't just simply an up and down job. The body could propel itself forwards, backwards, sideways, left and right. So when it started moving through the gallery space, people started to follow. There was a barking dog and a crying child in the audience, which added to the ambience of the performance. And I also discovered that if I stopped suddenly, I could generate swinging, which was an unexpected part of the choreography. This performance began when the body lifted off the ground and ended when the body touched down again. The review in the newspaper the following day had the headline, "A Pain in the Arts." We know now that we can indefinitely preserve dead bodies using plastination and display them in ways that we couldn't display them anatomically before. But at the same time that cadavers can be preserved indefinitely is at the same time when we can sustain comatose bodies indefinitely on life support systems. So near dead bodies need not die, dead bodies need not disintegrate. So we're generating these sort of liminal spaces where what's alive and what's not, what's existing and what's not is problematic.
It was approximately 1 year to ensure that he met the true criteria to be the right patient for this transplant. And sure enough, he did meet this criteria. At that time, we described a procedure which would essentially restore everything which was not functioning and appearing normal on his face, which included portions of the scalp through the forehead, the upper lower eyelids, the nose, upper lower lips, soft tissues of the chin, down to the level of the neck, and the underlying structures, which included the upper jaw, bones around the eye sockets, the upper teeth, the lower teeth, as well as the anterior portions of the tongue.
Dr. Rodriguez, he suffered a gunshot accident back in 1997. Amazingly, his sight wasn't affected. He still had his vision, but as you say, he can now smell something he probably hasn't been able to do. For 15 years, he's now talking. Tell us about the moment that he was able to do these things.
So the face from the donor body stitched to the skull of the recipient becomes a kind of third face resembling neither. Some other interesting things that are occurring now is in the realm of what's called epidermal electronics. The development by John Rogers of the University of Illinois of flexible and disposable circuitry. So circuitry that you can stick on, like a temporary tattoo, but circuitry that, even if deformed, can still function. So you can stick these bits of circuit on your skin, you can monitor your body functions for medical purposes, but also you can use those signals and wirelessly control peripheral devices or gaming devices. So technology is not only being miniaturized now, but also it's becoming flexible and disposable. And recently, John Rogers has also developed biodegradable circuitry. So if the circuit is silk, if the substrate is silk, if the circuit is printed in magnesium, if the insulation is silicon dioxide, then this bit of circuitry can be stuck, for example, on the surface of your heart, monitor the pathology of the heart, and then a month later harmlessly biodegrade inside the human body. So there'll be an increasing blurring between what's biological, what's synthetic, what's artificial and what's not. A project that is currently being engineered, and it's a project where we're developing this little robot. Took its first steps last year, but it's a 6-legged small walking robot that is going to be robust enough and small enough to climb up my tongue and into my mouth. I just have to be careful not to swallow. But it's a kind of aesthetic gesture towards the increasing micro-miniaturization and even nanoscaling of our technology, and one can assert that in the future all technology might be invisible because it's inside the human body. And at the moment we don't have any alert warning system of what's happening at a cellular level in the human body. By the time the symptoms surface, by the time you feel the lump in your chest, it's too late. The cancer has metastasized and you're in deadly trouble. But imagine if a nanoscale sensor, a nano-sized robot could detect and operate on these small cluster of cancer cells at the very, very beginning of this tumour. So we're kind of in a time now of what I call circulating flesh. We can take the organ from one body and put it in another body. we can take an amputated hand from a dead body and reanimate it on a living body. I met the first double hand transplant at a Paris conference about 15 years ago, and only after 6 months the person could animate their cadaver hands and already had rudimentary sense of pressure, temperature and touch. Now, there's no social problem if you have a kidney transplant, we interact normally. But if someone shakes your hand, and that hand is the hand that comes from a dead body, then it's a bit more disconcerting. And increasingly now, body parts are being commodified, are being exchanged, are being bought and sold. But as well as a time of circulating flesh, of the people who've come in, there's plenty of seats here, so just please come. As well as a time of circulating flesh, there's also a time of fractal flesh and phantom flesh. And by fractal flesh, I mean bodies and bits of bodies spatially separated, but electronically connected, generating recurring patterns of interactivity at varying scales. And what I mean by phantom flesh is that not only can you perform with your avatar online, but also with the increasing proliferation of haptic devices, you'll be able to have a more sense of a physical presence of that remote person. And before I go further, I'd like to premise the talk on sort of two recent sort of developments in contemporary discourse and technological possibilities. One is the Internet of Things. As objects get increasingly embedded with sensors, objects will be able to communicate with each other as well as with human beings. So we can have smart spaces, smart homes and so on. With object-oriented ontology, this is a really interesting philosophy. It does not premise the human. In other words, the human body, a bit of viral code, some electronic circuitry, all of these different objects are seen equally as interactive and collaborating objects in a wider system of things. So object-oriented ontology is very seductive because it doesn't premise the human. Last year at Curtin University, we developed, with the help of my lab, this 3D printed orthosis that can be worn by a person with a paralysed hand, and their hand could be animated and they could perform some simple actions. Now this is totally 3D printed, where the actuators are simply connected at the end and easily customizable and very effective in that it can be constructed all in one. And this idea of an ambidextrous arm, I mean, these objects are interesting for me to perform with, but they might also have uses for prosthetic attachments. So imagine a hand that the fingers bend one way, the thumb can rotate, you've got a right hand, but the fingers can bend completely the other way, the thumb can rotate backwards, so you've got a right hand and a left hand all in one. So I mean, if you're an amputee and you want to have a replacement hand, why not have a hand that's ambidextrous? Because sometimes two left hands might better perform the task than one left hand and one right hand. And this is also 3D printed, although in separate components. And we've already tested this. This was initiated at Brunel University. This particular project has very precise finger control and is actuated by pneumatic rubber muscles. So it's a flexible, compliant prosthesis. but you can see that the fingers can bend both ways, and we can have an ambidextrous hand that can be applicable to people, to amputees. But to me, it would be really interesting to perform with an ambidextrous arm, an arm that could sort of switch between left-handedness and right-handedness, and also counterpoint with the micro movements of the fingers. The third hand, in fact, was the first project in which I augmented my body with technology. It's actuated by electrodes on the leg and abdominal muscles. So each hand is capable of independent movements. And for example, in this performance, I was able to learn to write one word simultaneously with 3 hands, each hand writing a separate letter at the same time. So I had to keep my 2 hands on what my 3 hands, I had to keep my 2 eyes on what my 3 hands were doing. And because this performance was done on a sheet of glass, I had to learn to write the words back to front. I only learnt 2 words, evolution and decadence, because these were both 9-letter words. A performance where I used my 3rd hand, but also directed laser beams with optic fibre cables to the eyes. And by controlling the muscles around the eyes, you could literally scribble images with the laser beams. This performance amplified brain waves, heartbeat, blood flow, muscle signals, and this performance began when the body was switched on. And the performance ended when the body was switched off. Another performance with my extended arm. Now this was an 11 degree of freedom arm where not only did it have individual finger flexion, thumb rotation and wrist rotation, but each finger splits open. So each finger becomes a gripper in itself. And in this performance, whilst my right arm was extended with this 11 degree of freedom manipulator, my left arm was computer controlled using a muscle stimulation system. 15 to 50 volts to the muscles of my left arm. My left arm was performing involuntarily. This performance was for 4 hours continuously. We also had constructed a 3D model of the mechanism, and this performance was video streamed live on the internet, and people could see the video stream, but they could also see the 3D model of the mechanism, and the 3D model mimicked the movements of the extended arm. So this performance was for 4 hours where the body performed with its shadow, the video streaming, and of course choreographed the movements of the extended arm. I'm sort of going backwards because this performance happened in 1995. This is a muscle stimulation system. The blue switches indicate which muscles could be programmed via the computer. And this touch screen interface, if you touched the computer model mimics the movements that you've programmed. And a second later, in Luxembourg, where my body was, my body moves involuntarily. So you could access my body and choreograph its movements from a different place. So people in the Pompidou Centre in Paris, the Media Lab in Helsinki, and the Doors of Perception conference in Amsterdam were connected to my body in Luxembourg. I wore a head-up display so I could see the face of the person moving me. There were malicious agents out there who, not believing in the system, kept programming the same movement over and over again. This got pretty tiring because it was a 2-day continuous performance. And with Ping Body, instead of people in other places animating the human body, in Ping Body, the body becomes a kind of barometer for the statistical activity of the internet itself. So we use ping signals to measure the internet activity, and depending on the milliseconds returned to the host computer and mapped to the body via the muscle stimulation system, this was indicative of more or less how much internet activity was detected in that particular global location. I was always interested in insects and animal locomotion in terms of sort of evolutionary architectures. And in 1995, with the help of F-18 in Hamburg, we engineered a robot, a 6-legged walking machine, robust enough to support the ARTos body. And the machine is rather crude. It's about 3 meters in diameter, so 1, 2, 3. So if you can imagine, it pretty much filled this space. The body is standing on a turntable. It can rotate itself. The upper body exoskeleton allowed the body to make different gestures, and through the different gestures, it actuated the different leg movements. So you could walk forwards with a ripple gait, sideways with a tripod gait. The robot could squat, it could stand, and it could turn on the spot. This performance was the first performance I did with my clothes on, because the robot was hitting the concrete so hard that when I first got on naked, I couldn't stand the shock waves travelling up my spine, and the only way I could stand on the robot was to wear shock-proof boots. And I thought it prudent that then I should also wear some clothing as well. This was a larger robot, 5 meters in diameter. So if you can imagine, it took most of this space. And this robot, the first performance was done at Nottingham Trent University, where we developed it, but the second performance was at Gallery 291 in Hackney. It's a sort of converted church space, but that was sort of large enough to house the 5 meter diameter robot. It was actuated by these pneumatic rubber muscles. These rubber muscles were about 1 meter long. 4 bar of air pressure. They act like giant springs holding the mechanism together. 7 bar of air pressure. The rubber muscle expands in girth, contracts 20% of its length, producing a strong pulling force. And when these muscles are antagonistically bundled, you know, they work kind of anatomically like the muscles in our body. The robot can move. It can walk forwards. It can turn. And in terms of how it does it, effectively, if I have encoders on my leg joints, if I lift one leg up, 3 robot legs lift and swing forward. So the robot is always stable, it's always on 3 legs, but by stepping up and down on the spot, the legs can move, can swing up and move forward. A smaller 2 meter diameter robot, but this is an autonomous interactive robot. This robot has a rotating ultrasound sensor, and this robot does nothing until the sensor detects if someone is in the room. If someone is in the room, the robot stands, selects from its library of possible movements, performs a little choreography, and then afterwards sits down, goes to sleep, and waits for the next person to come along. So the idea of this robot initially was an actual virtual system. So the mechanical movements of the legs would modulate the facial behavior of the head. So the reason I'm showing this video is this hybridization of wheels and legs that they call legs, and it means that the robot can move very fast on a flat surface, but because of its springy nature, it can also perform very sort of athletic feats, and it can clamber over obstacles. So what's interesting is not simply the biomimicry in this case, but this hybridization of natural locomotion, legs with wheeled locomotion, producing a robot that can perform in very rugged terrain. I've always been fascinated, and here it's rather uncanny, the mammalian gait that's achieved in this robot. So it's a simple robot, but the leg movements are so indicative and so lifelike, they verge on the uncanny. And the interesting thing here too is that although this is a purely biomimicked form of locomotion, nonetheless this robot comes up with novel ways of climbing stairs, no matter what the dimensions or the width of the stairs. And this robot also learns how to best cross a rough terrain, and so it does have some kind of artificial intelligence connected with it. It can learn, and after a few failures, it picks out the right spots to cross. So here's a novel way that it can get up these wider stairs. Okay, with humanoid robots, this is the work of David Hansen, and with 32 micromotors into this kind of soft skin, he can generate a wide array of human facial expressions. Now, why is this interesting? It's interesting because if we're going to be interacting with robots, we're hardwired to respond, to have empathy with other human-like faces. And there's something quite uncanny about this. In fact, I don't know if you know about the uncanny valley But Professor Mori, a Japanese roboticist, theorized that as we make a robot more and more human-like, there's a point in time where our interaction with it becomes more and more creepy. Because it's kind of getting very human, but it's not quite. And it's very disturbing when we interact with it. But we have to remember that being creepy is not only a problem with robots. If we are socially maladjusted, if we have a stammer, if we are schizophrenic, there are humans that can be very creepy as well. So I don't think it's a kind of philosophical barrier to create more convincing human-like robots. It's certainly difficult at this point in time, state-of-the-art technology, but this is something that will eventually be achieved, I think. A performance recently at the end of last year, when my body was attached to the end of an industrial robot arm, an arm with a 3-meter task envelope. It was very difficult to achieve this performance because of the perceived safety issues. These industrial robots, you discover that companies don't even trust their own robots. A robot will only do what you program it to do, but the problem is that if there is a power failure, an unexpected power failure or some bug in the software, the robot might do something unpredictable, and if you're attached to it, you might be smashed into the concrete floor. But the whole idea of this was to choreograph the body's movements, so the body's position orientation, the body's velocity and trajectory are choreographed by the industrial robot arm. But after the body performed on the robot and performed this particular choreography, we had, of course, cameras attached to the robot, cameras above, a kind of an aesthetic surveillance system which enabled us to document this performance. Once this performance was realised, the body was replaced by a sculpture that was produced by scanning and sculpting this sculpture. And this should be seen in a moment. So, a sculpture of my ear. The sculpture of my ear replaced the body, and the same choreography was repeated. So it was a performance that had two parts. The first part was the body propelled by the machine, and then the large ear propelled by the machine. And we could actually do the programming offline and also simulate the movements using the computer program that was developed, and then we could then simply transfer that program to the robot's control system. Oh, and by the way, the sound was very important in that performance as well. I didn't play enough of it, but different motors positioned at the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, and so on. These motors were different sizes, producing different sounds, depending on how the robot was turning and gyrating. This project was, again, an earlier project, which was a sculpture that was designed for the inside of my body. So instead of attaching a hand on my arm, I designed a sculpture for the inside of my stomach. This had to be designed in such a way that closed, it could be safely inserted with the help of an endoscopist. When it was inside the stomach, the sculpture opens and closes, extends and retracts, has a flashing light and a beeping sound. So this was a machine choreography inside a soft, wet part of the body. This idea came about because the theme of the sculpture Triennale was site-specific works. But instead of a sculpture for a public space, I decided to make a sculpture for an internal space. So here's the sort of simple link and worm screw mechanism and an image of the inside of my stomach. Oh, by the way, it took 2 days and 6-inch insertions to film 15 minutes of video. Another performance that was related was actually the inverse to the stomach sculpture. In collaboration with another artist, Nina Sellers, we both underwent a surgical procedure to extract 4.6 litres of our biomaterial. And that's the biomaterial there. And it was placed in an installation titled Blender. Once every 5 minutes, the bottles of compressed air actuated the blender blades, mixing the biomaterial from the two artists' bodies. So instead of a machine choreography inside a soft organ, here a machine installation becomes the host for a liquid body composed of biomaterial from two artists' bodies, and it's anthropomorphic in scale, about this size. The ear project originally was imagined and imaged in 1997 as an ear on the side of my head. This was not a very smart place to have an extra ear. It might have involved partial face paralysis had the surgeries been done on my face. But in 2006, we got funding from a London production company, and we did the first surgical procedures to construct this ear. The scaffold is a biomaterial that is porous, and its porosity allows your cells to grow into the scaffold and also for the ear to grow its own blood supply. The ear at the moment is only a relief of an ear. So it's not completed yet, but you can kind of probably see it from a distance there. We still have to lift the helix to construct an ear flap, and then we're going to grow a soft earlobe using my adult stem cells. This will be done by extracting tissue from my body, extracting the stem cells from this tissue, replicating the stem cells, and then re-injecting them in situ to grow the soft earlobe. And once the ear is a fully three-dimensional ear, then we're going to reinsert the small microphone that used to be in there to internet enable the ear. So this ear is not just simply a project to replicate a bodily structure. The idea is to electronically augment the ear so that if I'm in Nicosia and you're in London, New York, wherever I am, wherever you are, you'll be able to log in and listen to what the ear is hearing. So this ear is not for me. I've got two good ears to hear with. This ear is a remote listening device for people in other places, and with the GPS also inserted, you'll be able to locate the ear, hopefully still attached to this body, and you'll be able to listen to whatever conversations are taking place. I showed this ear to my 2-year-old niece. She looked at the ear, and I could see that she could understand that it was an ear, because the first thing she wanted to do was to grab my head and turn it to see if this one had slipped off. So we've tested the small microphone that was in the ear. You'll see at the end here that even though my arm is going to be wrapped in bandage, even though the surgeon will have a face mask on. He'll speak to the ear, and the ear will pick up his voice and wirelessly transmit it. So the project is quite plausible. It's already been tested, but you can't do everything at the same time. We had to extract the microphone a couple of weeks later. It took several years even for the ear to become defined in any way. The last time I was here, I was actually explaining to Achilles the beginnings of the project, but it hadn't even started yet. And you can see here that there's also a partial plaster cast. So what's happened is that we have replicated a bodily structure, we have relocated it, and hopefully we'll be rewiring it for future capabilities. The ear project has generated some other related projects. I constructed a 4-metre long sculpture of the ear on the arm, and it was exhibited for the Lawn Sculpture Triennale. And here I also did a performance where I was lying on the sculpture, my body was covered in white clay, and so this full body was counterpointed by a larger fragment of the body, which was the ear on the arm. But whilst I was lying on the sculpture, I thought this would be a really beautiful performance if I could be suspended above it. And inserting 16 hooks into the skin of the back, when the body was rigged to the structure, the winch was pulled up the cable. Because the cable is braided, because the cable is twisted, when the body fully supports its weight, it begins to untwist. And as the cable untwists, the body starts to spin around. And I thought this was going to last for about 5 minutes. It lasted for about 15 minutes. First the body spun in one direction, it got faster and faster, then it spins in the other direction, and this performance began when the body was hoisted up and ended when the body was lowered down.
Kinetic Face Station is the revolutionary new way to create 3D facial animation. When you provide Face Station with video of an actor speaking into a camera, Face Station automatically creates matching facial animation in a 3D animation package, from a smile to surprise to a frown. The actor literally drives the 3D character. It's that simple and that amazing.
So effectively a camera and computer system analyzes the facial behavior, maps it to the 3D model, to the 3D avatar. That was state-of-the-art in about 2000. This is state-of-the-art now.
Imagemetrics is a markerless performance-driven animation company. We specialize in high-quality facial animation for video games and films. With mocap, markers are placed all over an actor's face, and the actor is then required to perform in front of dozens of special cameras. With Imagemetrics, however, there are no markers or special cameras. The actor's performance is simply recorded onto video, and the video is then analyzed by our proprietary computer vision software. Well, the actor is captured on video, and then the video is analyzed by our computer software, and the actor's performance is used to drive any facial rig. The client gets back an animation curves on the rig. I don't know. What do you think? Well, I think that they have a long way to go. I've seen better. It sucks. Whew. I mean, really? Can we just skip that question? They really, really are bad. Not good. Terrible. Actually. Yeah.
So I have to admit that I watched most of that video without realizing that Emily was not real and was simply one of an animation. And it struck me that at this point in time, we have this kind of collapse of skin and screen, and this is how we sort of interface. We interface with screens with skins collapsed, stuck to them. My own prosthetic head, which I won't demonstrate tonight, demonstrated the last time I was here, is a 3D model, 3,000 polygon mesh, separate eyeballs, tongue and teeth, but we mapped this skin texture over the 3D model to produce something like a 3D model of my head, which has a database, a conversational system. You can ask the head a question, it'll give you answers. But it also, the flattened skin did generate some other projects. And in fact, in this installation, this 4 meter by 3 meter photo, it was the largest photograph that we could print. If you can imagine walking into the gallery, the image is lit from above. So this face appears to float just above the ground, this landscape of stretched skin. So this floating face in the gallery space. Of course, now we can just simply capture a person's face, their skin. We can create skins instantly, either by laser scanning them or with multiple cameras. So you can skin any avatar to your own appearance. So there'll be a proliferation of avatars online that, in terms of their audio-visual quality, will be indistinguishable at a screen surface from the real person. A performance using a Kinect sensor which maps my arm movements to the head, the animation of the head and what sounds the head makes. So different gestures create different animations, turning, nodding and so on, and also generate different sounds and singing. This was a sort of an improvised performance performed with a Kinect sensor, my shadow and the prosthetic head. So you'll have to excuse my nostalgia for the human with the operatic scene there. and the project has had its own soundtrack using Second Life. A 3-week installation is titled Extract Insert, and the idea is to sort of mesh the actual space of the gallery with a virtual space, in this case Second Life, where a person visiting the gallery can be extracted and inserted into Second Life, whilst simultaneously avatars visiting in-world might be extracted and inserted into the gallery itself, and being able to interact seamlessly between the two. And because this is in 3D, that more optically meshes the two worlds together.
No, actually, that's me. So one of my favourite parts of hiding out was exiting a ride and walking around with beer in hand.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
I think still like exploding.
The gallery, you have to imagine this is an installation for 3 weeks. The gallery was split in half by a large screen, rear projection into Second Life. It was done stereoscopically, so with glasses, the avatars appeared as optically 3D, okay? So when you walked into the gallery space, you could interact with avatars, you could speak to them, and also occasionally the avatars sort of performed for whoever was there. So over a period of 3 weeks there were about 5,000 visitors to the gallery, about 1,000 in-world participants. So this sort of actual virtual interface where a real body under a spotlight, their image was extracted and inserted into Second Life, whilst the Second Life avatar under a virtual spotlight was extracted and inserted into the gallery space. So we're increasingly expected to perform in mixed realities. We're still biological bodies, but increasingly we're accelerated, we're extended by our instruments and machines, but we're also having to manage data streams in virtual systems. So the body is a kind of contemporary chimera, a body of meat, metal and code. And just to sort of finish up this part of the presentation, we know about 3D printing, but 3D printing now can be done using living cells. And if we could provide the complex structure of a heart, for example, or any organ, also indicate which tissue types you're printing with, you have to print with, then you will already, there have been 3D printers developed. Of course, we can't print something as complex as a heart yet. And even if we could, you'd have to dump it in a vat of nutrients, you'd have to electrically stimulate it, you'd have to have a blood supply. Hopefully the heart starts beating. Then you could do a transplant with no immunological consequences, because this heart would have been printed with your own or cells derived from your own stem cells. The transplants would not be a problem. So if we can grow organs with stem cells, if we could 3D print organs and body parts with stem cells, then we're going to have an excess of organs awaiting bodies, of organs without bodies. So in this age of body hacking, gene mapping, prosthetic augmentation, organ swapping, synthetic skin, synthetic blood, what it means to be a body and what it means to be human becomes problematic. We can remote control insects now wirelessly by controlling the frequency that their wings flap. We can guide an insect to fly in a particular direction, for example, or a beetle to walk in a particular direction. Then if you mount a tiny webcam on their back, these insects can become surveillance instruments. We can also grow parts of human liver in lab mice, which means you can do pharmacological experiments on human liver safely in a lab mouse. And increasingly now people are becoming internet portals of experience. Imagine if this body could see with the eyes of someone in London while simultaneously hearing with the ears of someone in New York, while someone in Tokyo is accessing my left arm and remotely initiating a task, and I can complete that task with my right arm using my own agency. This idea of a split body, a split physiology, voltage in, involuntary movements, voltage out, actuating stuff with my own agency. And one of the most, I think, radical developments was the turbine heart, which was inserted into the chest of a terminally ill patient several years ago to test it. And it worked wonderfully well. This turbine heart is smaller than any previous artificial heart, and also it's more robust and more reliable. The interesting thing is that it circulates the blood continuously without a pulse. So in other words, in the near future, you might rest your head on your loved one's chest. They're warm to the touch, they're breathing, they're speaking, they're certainly alive, they have no heartbeat. So we instantly erase all of our romantic metaphors about the human heart with just this one invention. Okay, I'm going to do a kind of a quick demonstration of Second Life. I think you'll find it interesting. Second Life, if you don't know what it is an online interactive environment. Get a chair. And it's been a very interesting environment to perform with, because you can perform with other people remotely, and there will be some people who are assisting me in this project, could you come over here, Jay? Can you hear me? Okay, so Jay is from the United States actually, and so we're here collaborating. Jay has assisted with some of my projects and performances. Jay, would you like to say something?
Just hello to everyone in Cyprus, and this is an interesting place. Second Life is a great creative medium.
Would you like to change costumes just to see what's possible?
Sure. There's also another friend of ours over in the back that you can come forward if you like. Cliff, can you hear?
So what's interesting is that your avatar can come in any shape, any size. It can creatively be any kind of structure, and you can change your body's appearance quite instantly, as Jay just indicated.
And so it can be any gender, alien, animal, whatever your imagination allows.
Okay. Could you also indicate the kind of effects that you can generate also instantly, Jay?
Well, yes, there are all kinds of things. Let's see. All kinds of particle effects and sound effects and just about anything you can imagine. I'm afraid my voice is breaking up.
It's not too bad. We can make it out, so it's not really a problem.
Okay.
So you can see that, in fact, this is my kind of Second Life gallery site. I have different installations in here, and I think what we'll do, Jay, is just have a quick walk around, and if you guys can follow, and then we'll eventually go to the installation of the performing automatons. So using now this installation actually was something that I first did in Second Life, and then in fact produced in real life in the gallery installation that you saw. The other installations are from real-world projects that have been translated into virtual interactive objects. You remember this this performance, so I've made a kind of a cube with this sort of animation in it, and you can see it from different levels. So it's effectively an animation cube. And if I speak, you can see my lips moving. So it does crude animation of the lips. Okay, let's go out of here. And I think I'll go around into the, there's a lot of other things to see. Well, for example, whoops, come back. If you have a space mouse, it's a little bit smoother in terms of moving. But if you see, this is a kind of interactive book, and if I zoom in on it, you can see that they're the plans for my walking machine. And if I zoom in even more, you can see the details that are possible. Okay, so it's possible, and some of these objects you can acquire in Second Life and just load them up with your own images. So it's sort of an interactive space where artists can, can do creative things. I also have a room with my suspension events. Oops, going difficult to control sometimes. I'm just using the keys here. But you can zoom in on this sort of exhibition of images. Anyway, you get the idea. It's a kind of a gallery space of all of my projects and performances. There's even Blender and there's Nina, and if I walk behind her, she'll turn around. And acknowledge my presence. There she goes. So she kind of knows that I'm around. The ear project, but I want to now go, Jay, let's go to the interactive room with I can't go through walls. Let's see.
I think you want to go this way?
Yeah. We're going to. Okay, so this is an installation where these objects, these brains, if you walk into these and collide with them, they generate sounds. If I'm close to the large heart, you hear the beating sound. Actually, I can also fly. And generate animations in the brains. Whoops, where am I? Anyway, one gets the idea.
Shall I get it started?
Yes, let's start. This is a kind of choreography where these anatomical bodies are interacting with my body. And the colliding brains generate the sounds. And the camera controls allow you to get different angles. So you can generate very cinematic effects, and you can record this as kind of documentation later on. Jay? Hello, Jay?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I think we'll stop it there, and thank you so much for assisting with the presentation.
You are very welcome.
I'll just find you again. We've got you full screen now.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. So I'm not completely sure what you just said.
Okay, I've got you full screen. So thanks again.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Okay, I guess if there's any questions you'd like to ask, feel free. Yes?
What you can't see with your body when you die.
I'm sorry?
What you can't see with your body when you die.
Why am I increasingly getting that question asked?
If you die,
Well, I mean, it's very interesting because, of course, you no longer only have two options. Before, it's either being buried or being cremated. Now you can get plastinated and become an anatomical specimen. If you're cremated, your carbon remains can be pressured into little diamonds that your loved one can wear. Maybe you'd prefer that option.
like one where you can become a tree, isn't that something as well, where you get cremated and then you become a tree afterwards? I think that.
Oh, well, I think there's all sorts of kind of possibilities, but to be quite honest, I haven't thought much about that as yet. Yes.
You said that we have to make certain meaning between for the aspect of the arts say.
Yes.
So I guess a lot of questions like whether contiguity is not really important in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I think I guess I'm trying to kind of problematize sometimes our simplistic points of view, and I just wanted to assert that art is a very different activity than you know, research in doing science, for example. But I think, of course, there are sort of ethical implications, even if you're dealing with aesthetics. I mean, in bioart, that's a kind of a realm of artistic practice where you actually have to get ethical approval to do projects. But of course, you're functioning within the institution of a university or a biological lab. I think what's interesting for me as an artist is to generate what I call contestable futures, possibilities that can be interrogated, possibly appropriated, but most often discarded. In other words, to explore alternate possibilities. Actually, the Sydney Biennale now has as its theme a statement by William Gibson, which actually I used many years ago. And William Gibson, the science fiction writer, said, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." So I kind of like that idea that that we can examine these possibilities in engineering these interfaces, not academically theorizing, but rather actualizing ideas. So as a performance artist, I'm not interested in just speaking about ideas. Sorry?
It's design. Or exploring possible possibilities, possible future.
Yes, but of course also that word, the future, is problematic in itself. And anyway, if there is a future in that sense, then it's by definition unpredictable. That's why I feel ideas about the singularity are kind of simplistic. It's a linear projection of one contestable possibility. It makes sense, it's seductive. If computer technology and computer power increases as it is exponentially, then perhaps in 2050 we have an artificial intelligence that's going to take over and humans become totally obsolete. But I think it's going to be a much more incremental and much more complex hybridity that occurs between bodies and machines and virtual systems that will, not result in a singularity as such, but rather in a multiplicity of futures, not in one actuality. Yes, sure.
You said about the objects, the different other things.
Yes, object-oriented.
Isn't it a bit like animism? Is that mistake? Or a techno-animism?
Yeah, not really. It's not really. I think it's a much more materialistic, philosophy or approach to things. So it's not. It's not so much that it sees everything as living, rather that everything is an object that systemically is interacting and sort of contributing in what's eventuated. So it's not so much, it doesn't have any sense of the spiritual, for example, or the animistic. It's a much more materialistic philosophy, I think.
What about agency? Maybe that chair over there is parked by some type of Japan or whatever.
If that chair has embedded circuitry and, for example, it knows I want to sit on it and it comes over to me, if I have circuitry in my body can get hacked as well. but getting hacked is just simply one condition of, or one possibility of technology being embedded in objects and embedded in the human body. Yes?
Thank you. My question is related to what you're saying about singularity at the end of humanity. Have you ever thought of the body as a war machine, as a weapon of mass destruction?
Well, it's certainly an object of absolute extinction at the moment. What guarantees your existence also guarantees your death. Every breath that you take, every step that you make, you'll break out into song. But the way the body operates guarantees increasing mutation, increasing wear and tear. So the whole functioning of the body guarantees its death. It's actually it very much authenticates the Heideggerian idea that your existence, your life is guaranteed by your death, is authenticated by your death. But for example, this may no longer be the case. We can soon, I'm sure we can do it right now, but there are social and other reasons why we don't. We could already engineer an artificial womb. If we engineer an artificial womb and insert a growing embryo and fetus in that artificial womb, in that external artificial womb, then your life will begin without birth. Right? And if we can replace your malfunctioning organs with replaceable components, whether stem cell grown or 3D printed or artificial replacements, then technically you need not die. So your existence doesn't begin in birth, doesn't necessarily end in death. Of course, you can have a catastrophic accident. You can be involved in a plane crash, an accident, an asteroid collision with the Earth, which will annihilate you and us. But in terms of your kind of biological existence, at the moment, actually, you probably will no longer die a biological death. You will die when your life support system is switched off. So I think the whole conditions of what our existence, the boundaries of our existence, are much more liminal now, are much more blurred. We're in this transitional stage where birth and death don't necessarily are no longer necessarily the boundaries of existence. So a dead body can have an existence, a material existence, now when it's plastinated. Before, of course, dead bodies would decompose. Yes?
I noticed that you mostly talked about the body, but in some cases you switched to my body.
That's a slip.
So I was wondering how much, having undergone all of these experiences of finding out that the body can do involuntary things, how much do you feel in your everyday life that you own your body, that it's my body rather than...
I think there's a problem of language. Language necessitates that we speak as a subject. I am an artist, I come to Cyprus, I give a lecture, but the word I does not signify some internal intrinsic essence. I only designates in language this body. I or you designates that body. I think it's a huge metaphysical leap to imagine that there's something intrinsic inside your head. In other words, the Platonic construct of a homunculus, the Christian construct of a soul, the Cartesian construct of a mind, the Freudian constructs of id, ego, and superego, which are actually suspiciously like the Greek categories of appetite, reason, and spirit. These are just kind of categories of language. So language helps us to categorize and comprehend the world, but also language confuses us about the actuality of the situation. So when this person speaks as an I, this person understands that I is this complex interaction between this body and other bodies in the medium of language that we communicate, in the social institutions that we operate, in the culture that we've been conditioned at this point in time in our history. So again, you know, when this person speaks about the body, this person means this physiological, phenomenologically experiencing, fully aware and interacting body in the world. There is no separate minded body. There is nothing inside my head. There are no images and information inside my head as we kind of conventionally imagine. The brain is not a trash can of images. The more and more performances I do, the less and less I think I have a mind of my own, nor any mind at all in the traditional metaphysical sense. Mind is just a word that describes subtle and complex neuronal and physiological behavior. And the word mind, consciousness, thinking, Wittgenstein said that thinking occurs not so much in your head. Thinking occurs with the lips that you speak, with the fingers that you write or type with. So, or Nietzsche asserts that there's no being behind the doing. It's the act in itself that is important. We assign agency in retrospect. You do something, and then I say, oh, you're a really bad person for doing that. So it's the act, not the agent.
But still, unthinkingly, I have this idea that I own my hand, that I can move it around.
Yeah, and it's a very convenient idea. It's convenient to believe this. We have evolved and we have a language that encourages us to believe this. It's convenient, but you have to make a distinction between use value and truth value. So having a belief might be useful, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If religion helps my mother overcome the grief of the death of her husband, that's a use value. If God exists, that's highly problematic and questionable, and I would not agree with that, or this person or this body's experience of the world doesn't indicate the necessity for ascribing essential essences inside our bodies, whether they're minds or souls or anything else for that matter. This is a totally obsolete, empty, involuntary body that performs best as its avatar on the internet.
I'm just wondering where disability comes into your work.
Where disability?
Yeah, because we see a lot of you in the performance, but we don't see the aftermath of that, and how you actually limit your physical abilities. And then also a lot of the idea of sort of cyborgism or chimerism, think about in sort of Pistorius and the handicap, being able to run. So just thinking about where that fits into the way that you're thinking.
Well, I think a lot of the developments in technology, in robotics, in exoskeletons, is the result of technology traumatizing and damaging bodies, like the development of prosthetic attachments was due to bodies going to war and being blown up, or bodies being involved in car accidents and being torn and their faces ripped off, their skulls and so on. So a lot of the developments in those areas are to patch up people. But I think we can go beyond simply repairing bodies. So at the moment, you have a biological body that has very limited survival parameters. Very limited. If your internal temperature varies 3 or 4 degrees, you're in serious health risk. If you lose 10% of your body fluid, you're dead. If you might be fatally infected by microbial life, by bacteria. Your skin is very soft. You can cut it. You can damage your body very, very easily. Now we can accept the biological status quo, or we can say, yes, the body is wonderfully designed and biologically evolved to this point, but it's fatally flawed in many of its operational capabilities. Its cognitive abilities is limited to a 1,400 cubic centimetre brain, for example. And that's determined, the size of the brain is partly determined by the size of the pelvis in terms of women giving birth to bodies. But if we're going to actually develop a fetus outside the human body, then of course we're not going to be worried about the size of the baby's head, for example. So there are going to be very different operational parameters that are the result of these new technologies. Yes, there'll be ethical problems, but there'll be other sorts of possibilities as well. Several years ago, two career-minded people had preserved their sperm and eggs so they could have children later on, have healthy children later on. Unfortunately, the husband died in a car accident. And after about a year of mourning, the wife decided she still wanted to have her husband's child, but the parents of the husband objected. And it went to court. Again, an unexpected kind of ethical dilemma that results because of the kind of the religious beliefs of the parents, and they thought that it just wasn't right that she would go ahead and have her dead husband's child. Several years ago in the UK, the first healthy baby was born from a 50-year-old frozen embryo. 50-year-old frozen embryo. So what does that mean? It means that we're desynchronizing the reproductive cycle of an individual with the birth of a child, or the birth of your birth happens at the deathbed of your sibling twin brother. So some really kind of weird situations begin to happen that were totally unanticipated. But we have to manage these in different ways. Yes?
So as we start to sort of raise the idea of death by reproducing, by creating this mechanical being, or maybe eventually transferring sort of fully not biological being, would that also be the idea of birth then? There would be no need or no birth. Would it be a world where, because of immortality, said there isn't any death, there isn't any need for birth? Would that ever be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the word immortality because it conjures up all sorts of cultural baggage and kind of transcendental urges and stuff like that, but certainly extended lifespans will become possible, but also, as you alluded, you might be able to kind of enhance Moravec, a scientist believes. You could upload, data from your brain and for example, download it to a computer that has a robot as a body, or just simply upload it to an internet site. Now, I think that's simplistic, and I think intelligence and what constitutes your memories are more than just information. Even if you could extract information from your brain, you embody memories all over. Certain smells will trigger a memory. Certain movements, certain performances will trigger memories. Certain relationships. So I think one has to think more holistically, but they're interesting speculations and ones that might be possible. Yes.
I was just kind of wondering, carry on from Andreas' question, in your response to the terms of the body. I'm just wondering whether that also extends now to the idea of shared memory and shared emotions. So there is total diffusion in terms of this idea of I no longer being in terms of memory, in terms of emotions.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, in a sense, our culture is this archive of human experiences. In novels, in paintings, in sculptures, and so in a sense we already share a history, we share a cultural archive of these affects, of these artistic expressions. So to me that's what's important, and I keep quoting Greek philosophers, but one of my favourites is from Hippocrates, who said, life is short, art is long. In other words, what's important is not the kind of individual, but the cultural contribution that we make in terms of our, emotional life, in terms of, most of the books we read are books from dead people. Philosophers, novelists. So this is, really interesting that our interactions are from this cultural archive, whether it's written or whether it's painted or whether it's expressed in other artistic forms. But I don't know if you're referring to more personal memories or...
I was.
Yes.
So maybe I didn't phrase it very just kind of curious. Just sort of thinking that one of the elements that constitute this sort of incliness to the sense of I, it's might extend, it's more than the body. It's the personalized memories, it's the personalized feelings, it's the personalized knowledge.
Yes.
Yes. So,
but these, I agree. What's meaningful for you in your social interaction with others is precisely that, but these are embodied in your lifetime, in your body or the body of others, and then when you pass away, when you die, these are perhaps archived, in cultural storage, in media of various sorts, in museums, So yes, what's meaningful whilst we have our individual existence is our personal memories, is our personal exchanges, which are are embodied. But when you die, then how does one access these and make these meaningful? It's through these cultural archives, I think. Okay, maybe one last question.
I wonder, for example, how you gain access to the ABB robot, to the performance. I'm asking, for example, with your person on the project, I'm asking because a lot of this work has to do with access to labs and very specialized kinds of expertise and also funds. And I wonder how that happens.
Okay.
And I guess, my question is with the conditions of this kind of work in outside of industry and outside of academia, and the different kinds of institutional interests in this work.
It's a lot of, I don't know if I can, but it's always difficult to get access to equipment or technology. For example, it took 10 years to find 3 surgeons to work on my ear for ethical considerations, for all sorts of, one surgeon was overheard speaking to the other surgeons halfway through the second surgery, and he said, well, maybe this is art, but if it is, we must be the artists. Which, is, of course, part truthful. It was very difficult getting access to the industrial robot because ordinarily you cannot be inside the task envelope of one of these robots because it's considered dangerous. In fact, last year when I was planning this project, unfortunately in Germany, a worker was killed by one of these robots. He got inside the space of the robot and he didn't know what it was doing, and it changed speed and it hit him, and so the company was concerned because, yes, the robot should only do what you program it to do. But if there's a power failure, if there's a bug in the software, it might go back to its nesting position, and it goes back in the shortest and quickest possible way. And if the concrete's there, you'll get bashed into the concrete. So they were very concerned about that. It was very difficult getting access to that. In terms of Symbiotica at the University of Western Australia, because that art organisation has been embedded in the human anatomy and biology department, they can access the biology labs, and over the years they've developed a strategy to get ethical approval from their projects. Having said that, in terms of doing research in institutions and collaborating with scientists, artists and scientists collaborating, which is kind of popular now as a paradigm of working artistically, we have to be careful that artists don't do bad research and scientists don't do bad art. And there have been examples of both happening, right? And unfortunately, institutions use the word research to authenticate artistic practice. But they're much happier that you publish peer-reviewed papers in books or in proceedings rather than doing performances and exhibitions. It's changing gradually, but still universities don't quite know how to manage with artistic practice, because institutions want to evaluate research using metrics and all sorts of statistical and totally useless means in terms of evaluating artworks.
Was there any data collection done during the ABB performance?
Data collection done? No. But interestingly, in a lot of these art and science projects, you'll get this kind of sort of quite simplistic, fill out a form, you come to the exhibition, oh, can you fill out this form? Did you like it? What did you like about it? I mean, come on. Those sorts of questionnaires or data collection is kind of, typical of scientific research, but not so interesting about art. So let's kind of forget this kind of ARTos research paradigm. I think it's causing more problems, and it's also creating a generation of art students who speak better than they make. And that's a problem as well, A lot of these PhDs in art don't really generate interesting artistic outcomes. They generate interesting discourse, perhaps. If you want to be an academic, if you want to be a theoretician, if you want to be a critic, but I think if you want to be an artist, then that's not the way to go. I mean, a lot of good art is totally retro, totally non-scientific. Its impact has to do with its affect, what it can generate, the intensity of feeling that it can generate. And it could be a cognitive intensity as well, so it can be a conceptual. One of the most interesting works I saw was Walter de Maria's project, where I kept walking over it in Düsseldorf. I kept walking over it, and it was just a square concrete area on the ground with a sort of a brass circle, And but when I found out what that was, it was just conceptually mind-blowing. That brass circle was a brass rod 1 kilometre deep into the ground. So all of a sudden, the artwork conceptually explodes your expectations. Surprise is that which happens when your sensory information doesn't match your expectations. And I think if art can generate anxiety, can generate uncertainty, can generate ambivalence, then it's probably interesting art. If it's art that just simply affirms, then it's, probably not. Okay, thank you so much.